Today we're going to try to stump Tom Grieve with questions about alternative weapons, something besides a firearm. But before we do that, I will remind you that we do have a gun giveaway going on. So you can use a firearm, you won't need an alternative weapon. It's absolutely free, it's happening right now, but it ends really soon. So click the link in the description down below to find out which brand new gun you could win. Tom, as a noted criminal defense attorney and former state prosecutor, I want you to take into account as much as possible why someone might choose or might not choose to carry and employ an alternative weapon to their firearm. I will go on record as saying that I believe the concealed handgun is the best, most effective means of self-defense. But we're talking about the possibility of using, carrying, deploying an alternative weapon of any type. Think of anything you can think of as an alternative weapon.
Okay, so I'm going to break up your question into two parts because I'm a lawyer and that's what I do. On the one hand,
billable time.
Yeah, exactly. We're taking a point 1 to a point 3. Okay,
right, there we go.
Number one, I want to talk about this just in an academic level of some reasons why someone would want to do that. But two, I also want to talk about it in a here's the reasons that I see in real life why people choose to do that. Because there's overlap, but I think it's worth touching on that. From a real life, let's start there. People are afraid of firearms if they're not comfortable, they're not trained. Maybe in certain scenarios, a firearm could be illegal, but another weapon could be legal. But typically speaking, the vast majority of the time when I see someone who chooses to carry something other than a firearm, it's because of lack of comfort and knowledge about firearms.
So it's a training issue, as always.
It's an education and training issue about firearms, their safe handling, right. I think that's kind of a fair place to kind of park that. There's a lot more we could get into in that, but I think that's a fair place to kind of park that. For more of an academic level, because I probably just covered close to, in my personal experience, other than felons and prohibited possessors, which could be another category as well, people who are illegally or are prohibited from possessing firearms, but still want to carry something. Check your local listings about what that can be. I'd say those are really the two groups, but the vast majority of them are the first group, where it's just lack of knowledge, lack of comfort. The second group, academic reasons, I think you could also kind of break this down. Let me throw the question back to you quickly so I understand. Are you talking about people who are carrying alternative weapons in addition to their firearm?
Yes, that's where I was leading into with this one.
Okay.
So you've got your gun. I have my flashlight. I've oftentimes carry some pepper spray as well. There's basically the tool belt, or the toolbox. How many tools do you have in your toolbox? And what are the pros and cons of having some or too many, or when you're dealing with them?
So let's address that one second. Let's just kind of wrap off the first one, because I think that gets into a really interesting discussion. So to wrap off the first part, I think a lot of people who are carrying a firearm but choose to carry some sort of less than lethal option, or maybe it's another lethal option, like a knife or something like that. But typically when we're talking about alternative weapons, in addition to knives, we're talking about SAPs, to use one of your favorites.
Yes.
We're talking about, and a SAP, for those of you who don't know, is basically like a leather strap with some sort of weight, maybe a lead weight at the end, that you can just strike people.
Well, you can't just strike people, but you do use it for striking. Yeah,
I think we need to watch Kevin do a SAP video where you're not demonstrating it on me, but something else. So, other things, we're obviously talking about pepper spray, we're talking about various electronic weapons and so forth, tasers, stun guns, that kind of stuff. There's so many other things we could be talking about, but I think that's your most common ones that we're usually referring to in this category. Maybe not the SAP unless you're Kevin Michalowski, but for most people on Earth, it's pepper spray and it's electronic is what we're talking about. And I think people just want to make sure that, to your earlier point, they've got tools in their tool belt. What happens if the neighbor's dog is being exceedingly aggressive, however it is you want to define that, and you know what, you think that they might be about to attack a kid, and you've got too many kids in your backyard. You can't just scoop up 10 kids because there's a play date, there's a birthday party or something like that, but there's a neighborhood dog that's off the chain, and you as a dog lover understand that that dog is about this close away from doing something really violent.
Yeah.
But you don't want to hurt the dog. At least you don't want to do something permanent to the dog. So that's where a pepper spray solution might be appropriate, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it does give you a spectrum of options. And same thing, of course, could apply to people, whatever else the situation might be, right? The downside, of course, kind of pivoting to the second side of the coin, is it gives you other options. And let me be very clear what I mean by that. You can only ever use deadly force if you meet the legal criteria for when you can use deadly force, okay? However, the simple fact of the matter is that there's always going to be that person in any crowd of 100 people, and likely more than that one person. We're likely talking about a sizable and substantial minority, depending upon where you live, perhaps majority, right?
Yeah.
Who are going to say, you should have tried the pepper spray first. You should have tried, and we've seen this in cop videos where someone's trying to stab a police officer, and the police officer pulls out a firearm and defends themselves. And somebody says, invariably in the comment section, or the family of the attacker, this was unreasonable use of force. You had other weapons. Why did you shouldn't have just gone to that?
Should have used the taser and then the baton and then the pepper
right,
spray
and step up and step up and step up. So I think that those create various issues. I think another thing is that while there is various degrees of firearm training quality and classes and education that are out there, there is a shadow of comparable training, education, resources for people to learn who are not in law enforcement how to use pepper spray, how to use electronic devices, how to use a SAP. Do you know what's going to happen, right? So I think that it puts you at a training disadvantage and an education disadvantage. Did you know that using pepper spray could be considered a battery in your state, right? So a lot of people just don't know that. So you still have to meet certain legal criteria. You can't just pepper spray someone because they're being loud and unruly. I mean, depending on what they're saying, maybe that's threats, but that's not loud and unruly. So it opens up a legal world of issues. It invites criticism and attacks. And let's be clear, if you're in a position where you can use lethal force, if you choose to pull out your firearm rather than your pepper spray, that's perfectly justifiable.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely. The rules don't change because you're carrying pepper spray.
The rules don't change, but the emotional reactions of your jurors might. And that's the problem. And folks, don't shoot the messenger here when I say that. I'm just trying to alert you to how unfair and unreasonable a lot of people can be. We probably all know that. I'm not saying that's fair. Yes, a strong defense attorney can do a lot to push back on that, but it doesn't change the fact that, unfortunately, it is one of the downsides about having an expanded tool belt.
And I'm going to just interject at this point. If you carry an alternative weapon in addition to your firearm, you must train with that alternative weapon, and very importantly, you must train to transition from your alternative weapon to your firearm should your alternative weapon not stop the threat. And right now, I'll say it and it will upset people, folks don't get enough firearms training. I don't know if they're going to add on an alternative weapon, an OC training class or a coup baton training class or expandable baton training class in addition to their firearms training if they decide that they're going to carry this alternative weapon.
And I really want to clinch this on kind of where you started, which is if I can only have someone carry one thing, it's their firearm every time. First time, last time, every time in between. If you're only going to carry one thing, I want it to be that. And I think a lot of folks who maybe aren't as disciplined, they're going to look at their firearm, which is likely bigger, heavier, harder to carry relative to pepper spray or something like that, and they're going to say, I'm going to leave the firearm in the glove box at home, on the nightstand, whatever else the case may be, because they lull themselves into a false sense of security that, hey, my pepper spray is me good enough. Now, for a lot of you out there, myself, and I know yourself included, that idea is, you got to remember, okay, indulge me, okay? I got my degree in theology. Okay, if you do not know. So I'm going to break out a theological term because it's the only place I can go with this. That idea is anathema.
Wow.
Anathema. In other words, that is like contrary to the faith. That is beyond like heresy in a sense, and I'm sure theology nerds will quibble with that, and just bear with me, folks. That's a low resolution version of what I just did there. But the idea of I'm going to leave the fireman home to take the pepper spray, that's like anathema to people who are in the faith, such as ourselves, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this video. But it doesn't change the fact that there are other people who are maybe exploring, they're learning about things, and as a result, there are people who are 100% going to do that.
Yeah, and honestly, you're right. People exploring, maybe it is a stepping stone that you choose pepper spray as the first step on your self-defense journey, and you work your way into that. But again, training. You have to be able to train to utilize that because it just adds more to your decision-making process.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, Tom. Always love your insight. Really appreciate it. Thank you, folks, for watching all the way to the end. And I want to let you know we still got that gun giveaway going on, happening right now. It's absolutely free, but it ends really soon. So click the link in the description to find out which gun you could win.